Welcome in, everybody, to the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. I'm your host today, Kyle Jessie. We are Ronnie more or less today. He is on the road traveling, so I'm going to have to carry this thing today, which is a lot of weight on my shoulders. But I consider myself a little bit of a dummy. But luckily, I got two really smart guys on the podcast today. Guys,
Low bar, Kyle. You're setting a low bar.
let's not bury the lead. I would say over the course of history, there's never been an October 30th more polarizing than this one that we have today. Obviously, Bass announced that there's going to be no entry fees for the 2025 season on the Elite Series, and like I said, got my two guys here, James Hall and John Cruz. John, it's been a pretty crazy day. Plenty of different opinions. People say this, people say that, but John, you've been doing this for a really long time. I just am curious, what were your initial takeaways, when the announcement was made?
I didn't have any idea that this was coming. And I thought some people, they've asked me, I've had it probably 6 or 8 texts, did you even know this was coming? No, I didn't know it was coming. Is it something new that's been floated in the bass fishing world? No, it is not. It was floated many, many years before the MLF and the BPT tried it, but they tried it and did their deal for completely different reasons, in my opinion, than what Bassmaster is doing. Bassmaster has heard this for a lot of years from anglers that have wanting to have no or low entry fees to help continue to legitimize what we do as a legitimate sport, to put it on par with the golf and the tennis and football and basketball. Like, you make it to the NBA, they're paying you to be there because you're that good. You're not having to continue to pay in order to play in an NBA basketball game. That would just be ridiculous, and everybody would know that's not a real sport. So I think for the legitimacy of our sports concerns, I think this is a huge deal. I think it's a big deal, Kyle. And I think that Bassmaster is, and I thought it was kind of cool that they did keep it quiet, because I was with some James and others from Bassmaster here recently, and I never heard a peep out of it. And I just think that's cool. I think it's fun.
Well, that's actually what I was going to get into next. Is you kind of alluded to it. It seemed like it was the best kept secret for a long time, and myself included. I didn't even know about this until the day before that it was announced. So, James, this is where we're going to bring you into it. Obviously, you've known about this decision for a lot longer than John and I have, and you were a big part of making this, this happen, and all the process that led up to it. Obviously, it's not something that was taken lightly. Took a lot of effort and a lot of energy on on the hands of the folks here at Bass. So talk to me a little bit about the process, kind of how we got to the model that we're at.
Yeah, well, it was a big deal, and I wasn't on the initial conversations. It was something that I think Chase Anderson, Philip Johnson, Nick Grabowski, our CFO, decided to kick around whenever they were planning on adding more money into the payout this year, and they're like, well, we're adding this. We had an Elite Series angler meeting in August where the no entry fee tournament, are we ever going to get there, conversation was brought back up again. And so they decided to run the numbers, and they created, I don't know how many different models of what it might look like. And then they brought me in and asked my opinion. And I was like, oh my God, this is exciting, because I've been with the company now for 25 years, and we've been talking about it for 20 of those years. And every time we get to kind of the let's look at the numbers, and like, it just doesn't make sense. Just doesn't make sense. And this time, with additional funds put in, and a couple of other important things key, and that is an optimized payout. So we looked at out of 100 different payout models, and then overlaid those models onto what these guys accomplished. Every angler that fished for the last 4 years, that was kind of our data set. And we laid it on top of that. And how beneficial is this model overall to the entire field of anglers? And how detrimental was it to the entire field of anglers? And so looked at tons of models, and finally came up with one that seemed to be a bit of a magic bullet, where 65, a little more than 65% of the anglers would have benefited over the past 4 years had we been under the no entry fee model. And I'd say another 10% of those guys that didn't fall within that 65% were only benefiting a couple $1,000s over 4 years. So I mean, it like a light bulb went off when we saw how little impact that would have had over that span of time for the entire field of anglers that had been fishing. So with that, this pay per performance concept became a big part of that. John talked about legitimizing the sport by not requiring an entry fee. That's huge for us. And again, this is year one of it. You can't have golf year one come out with $100 million in payouts. They built up to that. And so what I hope all the elite guys see, I know John understands it, that we have started it. We've started that process now where there is no longer not playing for their own money. They're not winning other anglers' money. They're winning money from bass and only bass. So was step one. Step two was the concept of paying for performance. Because if you look at the old payout model, kind of crazy. We were paying, and it was voted on by the anglers, and we're like, yeah, however y'all want to spend the money, do it. But we're paying 50th through 75th, I think John is right. We're getting a $2,500 check. And that means they were losing $2,500 per event if they fell in that range. So that they're getting a check, but they were losing money. Kind of weird. Then we were paying 11th through 50th the same amount of money. They were all making $10,000. And so it's like, if this is a professional sport, in my opinion, that 11th place guy should be paid for out fishing that 50th place guy. You know what I mean? So I think you have the no entry fee. Now we have guys being paid for how well they perform. I think it's a giant step towards, redefining what it means to be a professional angler.
And that's something that, I was even fell victim of, I would say. I think that a lot of people, when they see the payout, their initial thought is the payout's not as good. It's not this, it's not that. Because when you look at it from a very just base level, that's what it looks like. But then when you dive into the numbers, the case studies, obviously you've shown, the spreadsheet of all the anglers over the last 4 years. And when you compare those numbers, it's really eye-opening, because a lot of times I think we as fans, I'll put myself in that category, don't think about that upfront cost for the entry fee. And John, that's something, that you talked about when we, spoke on the phone earlier, is kind of an overview of what this is going to do. And, I'd like to have you explain that, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're, James and the rest of the people at Bass had that hard task of figuring out exactly how to divide up the money, because with the Bassmaster entry fees, the anglers were contributing a little over $4 million. Bass was contributing about $4 million on average for the last 6+ years, whatever. And so that money pooled together is what the current payouts look like. And when you basically cut that in half, with like when now the angler's not putting in their half of the money, it's not going to look the same. And I think that's at first on the surface what a lot of fans and some of the elite anglers are going to say, until they kind of wrap everything around what really is happening in their head. They're going to say, oh, well, if you have half as the amount of money, the payouts aren't going to look the same. Like the payouts as a total are half the same, but you have no expenses. You have no costs to enter the tournament. You have your travel costs. Some guys stay at the cheapest motels or campgrounds or wherever possible, and they minimize their costs as much as they can. And then some guys, they rent really nice houses, or they have really nice campers, and they do it up big time, and because they have the budget to do that. So you can kind of go on the road with a little bit of a variable on how much you're spending there, to either reduce your costs as much as you can, but there always is going to be some travel costs. You're looking at it, I'd say, at a minimum of $1,500 per event, between gas and all the other travel and lodging expenses that you're going to have. You could spend up to $2,500 pretty easily for some of these tournaments. So that's kind of your range that you're looking at, but that's the cost to participate in the tournament and have a shot at that $100,000 per event, the $100,000 angler of the year, plus a few other places. And you have the Bassmaster Classic, which that top place in 26, I don't believe changes. Some of the lower places change, but that's the give and the take of not having that $45,000 entry fee for the entire season. That's where that changes. I had to talk with one angler earlier, and they're like, well, the 2025 classics not paying out. I'm like, no, they didn't. That's not affected. Hold on, time out. And they're like, oh, okay, well, cool, this is great. Then once they kind of got that explained to them, they were good with it. So I think there's still a lot of learning from even the anglers, as it's so fresh and so new. But to me, I've been in this sport, like James, you've been with Bassmaster 25 years. I've been basically fishing about the same amount of time. I've been involved, dealing with Bassmaster either on the angler advisory boards or just numerous personal conversations with Bruce Aiken and Chase Anderson and so forth. This kind of a payout structure is nothing new. I've seen multiple different versions and multiple different models. And I know, James, you said you guys ran a bunch of different ones, and it's really, really tough to find one that benefits the majority of the people. And that's what, I'm just going to wait and see how it does for us. I think it'll, overall, I think it's going to be a good move for us.
Yeah, and I have a question for you, John, and that is one thing that not a lot of people talk about. Now we've seen really cool comments from fans. Some of them are like, every man can now qualify for the Elite Series and actually fish it. So from your view, what does it look like on the aspirational side and the access side for guys who probably didn't accept their Elite Series card because of that $45,000 barrier? In your mind, what is it going to do to the Elite Series moving forward?
I think it's going to be really good. I mean, when I mentioned before, I've been involved for almost 25 years full time as a professional. I graduated college in 2000, and I've basically been fishing full time ever since. When I started, that $45,000 entry fee level, when I started, would have been a no-go for me. I would not have been able to do it. The invitationals were, I think, $1,100 or somewhere in that range when I started. They were not even called the Opens back then. And that was where I got my start. I won a boat in my third tournament, won 20 grand. That was the chunk of money that I used to parlay that bunch of money into a career. And then when I started on the Bassmaster Tour, I think the entry fees were about $2,000 each. And that was, at the time, that was reasonable, but bigger. You could win a little bit more. And then I was able to get established as an angler, kind of, have some sponsors that were able to compensate me. And I was able to, figure out some good business arrangements. And then when the Elite Series rolled around, it was 11 tournaments for $5,000. It was 55 grand. But luckily I was established as an angler, with an income from the sponsors and able to pay for that. So that was very possible for me at that time. So the way the timing worked for me in my career was amazing. And now I agree with you, James. I think that it's going to open up opportunities for anglers that looked at that $45,000 entry fee and said, that's just not even possible. And I think what's going to happen, it's going to trickle down to other tournament trails. I don't know how this, in the future is going to affect the Opens. I think it will. I think we'll see some possible adjustments there. I think we'll see some possible adjustments to the college series. And I'm not talking about just Bassmaster. I'm talking about across the board. So I think this decision is going to have ramifications, across the entire industry, and hopefully lift up what we're doing as a sport as a whole, to show people that, like, this is the real deal. These dudes that are coming, like this Easton Fothergill, he is fixing to take some money over here, dude. I'm telling you right now.
That's a little a precursor there, because we're planning to have Easton Fothergill on the podcast here in the next few days. So we'll certainly share.
I'm gonna try to hold on to mine as hard as possible, buddy. He's been taking everybody he's fished against so far.
Yeah, we will certainly spread the love to him. But the last thing I want to ask you guys, and it seems like this aspect of the conversation always gets brought up when it comes to professional bass fishing, and we've kind of hit on it already, but I want to hear y'all's take, more extensively on it. Is when you talk about professional bass fishing, people always put an asterisk on it because, of course, like we've talked about, you're paying your own money to participate. Like, if you could imagine, like y'all said, 20, 25 years ago, to today, to being able to legitimize the sport. Like, James, starting with you, like what does that mean to you?
Well, it's dude, whenever they brought me in on the conversation, I got chills because it's something that we have been talking about for so long. It had been tried and failed. And that was like, well, I guess it's just not possible, as a sustainable model. And I'd like to reiterate right now that if this was not, and John mentioned it, if this was not a sustainable model, Bass would not have pulled that trigger. So, their keyboard warriors are saying, "Oh yeah, wait till next year. The entry fee is gonna come back." Well, they're not. It's a situation where Bass, when we knew if ever we got to the point where we're going to seriously consider this, that this was going to be established as the new norm. So it had to be sustainable. And whenever they were like, "Yes, this is going to be sustainable," because that was my number one question. I was like, "Oh, this makes me so nervous," and they're like, "Don't be nervous, man. We got this, and we think that this is, the next level." Bass has had incredible momentum the last couple of years, and the really good business people on their way up, they disrupt, and they disrupt so they can continue to grow. And I feel like this has been an exceptional, maybe the biggest disruption that I've seen in professional and competitive angling since I've been around it. And my assumption is that with that disruption, based on what John says, the opinions we're seeing online, that's going to give us the opportunity to continue to grow. So yeah, I was extremely, extremely excited about it. I'm glad that I hadn't retired yet before they decided to pull that trigger.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of cool aspects, that come out of this. But just to reiterate, normal tournaments as we know it, like, I mean, I fish some weekend tournaments here when I have time at home. There is still that novelty, and everybody's still going to continue to gamble for taking other people's money. Go down to the lake here, Smith Mountain Lake, next weekend or whenever, possibly drop $100, fish against my buddies, see if I can take their money. Like, there's nothing that's not stopping. That's not stopping anytime soon. But that's going to be what's the continue to be the norm for the weekend warriors and for the guys that just love it. But for that professional level, when you earn that spot into the Bassmaster Elite Series, that means that you're at the top level and you no longer have to pay that entry fee. And that is a huge, nugget or discernment between weekend, having fun and an actual professional. So I think that is going to be what I'm kind of looking forward to is one of the biggest things out of this whole scenario.
Well, guys, I we wanted just to do this basically emergency podcast, if that's what you want to call it. To all the regular viewers of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, sorry for the delay. It's been a few weeks off with Ronnie Moore having another young one, so it's
fertile. He is
fertile. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Very selfish of him, but
so lazy.
But we're gonna get it back going. John, thank you so much for joining us today. James, thank you for filling in, and John, be sure to get that deposit sent over here in the next couple of weeks, or don't, because we're not doing that anymore. So
we have to pay. It's a membership fee, $500, dude. I'll hand it to you in cash. That's fine. Whatever.
Perfect. Well, guys, appreciate you for joining us on this episode of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, and we will see you on the next one.